So welcome to all of you for the second GATE research meeting. Marie and Annika prepared a presentation which is quite short, which just helps us to remind ourselves where we are because we don't meet so often. So I think this helps us all. And they will also set a little bit the stage on where we want to go with this meeting today. So it is planned that we give the presentation and then Tim, Daniel, and Etienne, then afterwards it's your time to give your ideas. I do not know if you had a look into the official invitation. I try to steer you a little bit on your topic, but of course you're free to say whatever you like and whatever is on your mind when you hear the thoughts about the gate. So, okay. Now I give the floor first to Marie.
Yes, to me?
Right?
Yeah. Great. Also, a very warm welcome from me. We have 1.5 hours. This is why we try to give a short summary and introduction to the gate. We have the structure that first I would like to recap what the gate is actually doing and what we aim to achieve with the gate report. Then Julia will summarize the main findings of our first meeting and present some initial expectations that others have towards gate and gate data and gate report. And then Annika will inform us about the main topic of today, which is the gate data. So very short recap from me. With the Open Science Learning Gate, we have the possibility to achieve 3 goals. One of the main goals is that we can identify what the current state of open science is, because we're collecting insights from open science experts on how they teach, how they practice, and how they perceive open science. So this is the GATE data that we're talking about. And we are not only collecting information about open science in general, but also open science at the intersection with AI. And we aim to publish GATE reports annually summarizing our findings. And thus we want to inform the open science community, but also non-experts about how open science is practiced and what the main guiding thoughts of open science are. And as this is an ongoing process, an ongoing knowledge exchange, we will also have data in the upcoming years, and thus we are able to identify more or less or talk about the development of open science. But the GATE data and the report is our main topic for today. And how are we collecting these data? We have 2 workflows. On the one hand, we have a GATE service, which is a questionnaire collecting data from the open science community. And on the other hand, we are conducting workshops and solution sessions at conferences or institutions. And these 2 workflows are providing different formats and kinds of data. On the one hand, the service has the ability to collect the so-called guiding thoughts, which are the principles, the values, the practices of open science. These are terms such as accountability, reliability, and so on. And we are prompting these terms, we are prompting these guiding thoughts. So participants check the boxes. I have implemented transparency, for example, in my work. I have accountability and so on. And they also have the possibility to provide their individual understanding on the respective guiding thought. They also have the possibility to articulate any new guiding thoughts that we didn't ask for, that we didn't offer in the questionnaire, and also the understandings. And of course, we are collecting also metadata. And the workshops, the solution sessions are basically discussions with open science experts telling us how they or their institutions implement open science, how they advance open science, but also if they did not implement yet, what are the thoughts, what are the ideas? So they exchange knowledge and ideas, and thus the entire community is informed and can proceed with implementing and advancing open science within their communities. And of course, people are also articulating gaps that they identified in the whole system, in the infrastructure, and so on. And with this gate knowledge, we are able to also articulate any derivations to new guiding thoughts or further gaps within the system. And as I said, it's an ongoing process. This is why these data in the blue box are relevant also for the upcoming years, also for the upcoming reports. Since we launched the current service version last year, we of course collected data via the questionnaire, which are these guiding thoughts and individual understandings. We also conducted solution sessions at conferences, at the Meta Science Conference and Open Science Conference, where we discussed how to implement and advance open science. And we had very productive research meetings. You both participated in these meetings where we already drafted first ideas of the GATE report. With the report, we would like to position GATE within the open science ecosystem, to clarify that it's a continuous learning and observation process. It's a dynamic, it's a living service, for the community. We're collecting data from the community and feeding it back. So it's very community-based and community-oriented. And it supports the research ecosystem as a transparent, cooperative, and non-profit infrastructure. So this is what we really want to stress, that it's very user-centric, and this is also the goal for the report. It's an infrastructure that reflects open science practice as it is lived, within the community. It highlights the guiding thoughts and understandings. Of course, it has the possibility to reveal any gaps between practice, theory, policy, and the infrastructure, and it makes the collective knowledge visible. We aim to structure it and return it back to the community via the reports. And it's important to understand that it's not about ranking or evaluating any authors or materials. It's just providing the knowledge about open science and the development. And with increasing data, it can be also target group specific. We aim to address, on the one hand, open science experts, who are actors, who are practitioners, stakeholders of open science, researchers, educators, those who provide data infrastructures, policymakers, or funders, but also we aim to reach the wider community, those who are not in the field, who are new to this topic, the wider society also, or the policy audience. We thought about three main parts of the GATE report. We would like to introduce the community open science experts as well newcomers to the topic of open science, and therefore we would like to start with explaining open science out of the open science bubble. And bridge open science with societally relevant topics such as AI and research, data security, trust in science, and so on. And the main part, of course, would be a structure and a perspective on the GATE data, which is coming from the GATE service, and the solution sessions. And as a last point, we would like to bring it or embed it into a wider context and possibly an outlook to the future. We aim to have the first draft until May. And with you as the experts, we would like to discuss how could we translate the concept of GATE and the dialogical data and Annika will explain this term in more detail later. How can we translate it into a meaningful, understandable, and community legitimated report that is useful for society, for policy, and for the research community? Do you have any questions on that? Otherwise, I would hand over to Julia.
Yeah. So I have an interesting task because I'm going to recap the first research meeting, but we were all there. Yeah, it's just so it's for us to remind ourselves. Okay, so it's a long time ago. It was on April 4th last year, and you all remember that we it was a hybrid meeting. Yeah, it was in Kiel, but most of us were online. So we also recorded this meeting, so everything, yeah, no, is also documented on the Gate website. And we also wrote a research report on the meeting. So what I did on the next slide, if you can show Marie, I just tried to no, summarize what is written there. So yes, we do know who was there because we are here. So I think it's better for, I actually prepared this a little bit for Etienne, but okay. Um, so it was our first research meeting. So that was the meeting where we more or less developed our ideas. We already had the service running, but I think not even in our final version. Yeah. So what we did is we showed you what data was coming in, but only from the service, not from the solution sessions. And we had the first discussion on what can we do with this data in a sense of how rich is this data and how can it help the community. So the perspectives from you, yeah, they were very different. So I'm going to go through them. So I think first was Tim, yeah. So your talk last year was a lot on the value of the qualitative richness of the data we have. Yeah, that's what Marie just said, and Annika will show in a minute. So we do have these prompts of the guiding thoughts, and then we have a lot of people who tell us what they connect with this guiding thought. Yeah, for example, what they write in a sentence or in a word, what they understand when they read fair. Yeah. So it's very rich. You recommended a bottom-up analysis instead of like taking categories, no, and just scheduling it down. I actually cannot remember or maybe you can remember, yeah, but you suggested methods such as affinity mapping, but what was interesting for me was that you said, oh, we might be able to see which themes emerge over time, not the first round now, yeah, but even it might be even now, we don't know, yeah, but over time, yeah, we can see topics changing, yeah, and what comes in. So, and that's what I made in bold, because I think this is very important for us today. You also highlighted the importance of understanding what is missing, and not only what is present in the data. So we already tried to include this thought today. Maybe you realized when Marie said that we have data from the solution sessions, and this data shows us what actually is missing. Yeah, so we have it already there. We can show you later what we mean with that, but maybe we even have more. Yeah. And then, yes, of course, you said to link it to Zenodo or OSF, which is totally okay. So the second expert was Daniel. So you connected our data to knowledge graphs and also to the semantic web and the technologies of it. So this is your field, and I think we could follow you. I really appreciate that. These knowledge graphs, I think they come in now again with an idea to use nano publications, yeah, and not the nano publications itself, yeah, but how we can structure them, and how we use the vocabulary. So we will also discuss this today. You said that we could model the guiding thoughts via Wikidata identifiers and triples, which identifiers I do understand, but triples I cannot follow. But then, and that's why it's in bold, you already mentioned these standardized vocabularies. Yeah. So, and I think this is connected to what Tim said. It's so rich, yeah, on the one hand. On the other hand, there's more or less nothing standardized. Yeah. So it's like we play with terms and we collect because the community is so broad. Yeah. We do not know what they mean when they use their words. So the question is, how much standardized vocabularies do we have? Do we have it? And can we use it? And can we refer to it? And also, and thank you for that, you said, please don't make it a PDF, which is very nicely put here in the Gate report as a living, explorable digital object. Yeah. So yes, we are still on finding that out. Yeah. So what's the form at the end? Yeah. So how do we give it out to the world? And then you also said personalized access paths for different stakeholder groups. And this was also mentioned by our last expert, Marie, when you can change, which was Bernhard. He's not here today. So he's an expert for modeling. And his main point was that we shouldn't produce something which nobody needs. Yeah, so this was his very clear message. So I put it here in bold. He emphasized user profiling and audience-centric knowledge structuring. That means actually what he asked us to do is you should talk to people, no, before you start producing something. What they want to, what would they read? Yeah, how do they want this information provided, and what information would be interesting for them? Yes, so he recommended storyboarding and interaction mapping. We didn't go so far, but we did something, and I will show it to you now. So we asked several people, but we have two examples here now in an email, actually. So if no, when would be an open science report interesting for you? Yeah. So what would be the key factors? When would you read it? So we asked Daniel Pizzolato. I do not know if you might know him. He is not from the open science bubble. He is very connected to the European research area. He's coming from the research integrity side. No? So I'm just going to read to you what he answered us. He said, start with why open science matters and its added value, not abstract definitions. Speak to skeptics in a sense of that open science is not the same as sharing everything or harming competitiveness. Clearly distinguish open science from open access only or naive openness, such as ignoring sensitive data or legal constraints. Keep the report focused, concrete, and useful, and not encyclopedic. Address real concerns, for example, career incentives and recognition, costs of open access publishing, legal and copyright questions. These are real concerns from a researcher perspective. Focus on practical guidance, what to do with data, method, and results, discipline-specific examples, for example, chemistry, or decision trees across the research cycle. So that was his idea, without knowing anything actually about the gate. Yeah, the question was only he doesn't know a lot about the gate, and the question was what would be interesting as an open science report. Then we also asked some people who are in the open science bubble. For example, Letizia Bracco from OSME, and she answered. So she wants a concise format, maximum 20 pages, with a clear summary and key takeaways up front, short introduction explaining the gate's purpose. She wants help help readers to answer what are the current trends in open science learning, which materials or communities might I have missed, and the real added value should be discovering reusable materials, finding relevant contacts and communities, And she strongly says avoid the administrative jargon, governance heavy explanations, overlong annexes and bibliographies, and self promotion. Focus on what works in practice. That's actually the same as Daniel said, not historical overviews, an optional help desk or contact point when readers need more support. So this is just for us to, we do not, no, we do not need that in detail, but it's just for us to get a little bit our head running also on who are we targeting? Yeah, like for whom is it? We have several other answers, so we will also go over that in the next few weeks again. But I think it helps already a little bit to see where we want to go. Okay, I think that was from my side. Yes, and now Annika, it's your turn.
Yeah, I'm going to dive a little bit more detailed into the data. I mean, we have very limited time, but I think it's especially important because now we're talking about this richness, especially of qualitative data, to look a bit at the qualitative data we have and we have collected. So this slide is basically just to remind you of the two sources. Marie mentioned them, so I don't think we have to go back into them into detail. But where does our data come from? It comes from the date service, the questionnaire, and it comes from the solution sessions. And the data in both these, let's call them boxes, are also connected to each other. And I will show that a bit more in detail in a second. But I think what's more important, and that's on the next slide, is to zoom out and think, how can we actually, well, in a way, classify our data? And on the left-hand side, there's a very, let's call it classical perspective. So what kind of data do we actually have? So of course we have on the very, well, in the ceiling, maybe we have the questionnaire that is giving us the structure of the data. And then you have metadata. So we have demographics, subjects, areas of interest, we have DOIs. And that's not so difficult to kind of structure in a way. And then we have data from closed questions. So that's dichotomous response data. So it's a yes or no, basically. Did they select this guiding thought in the service or did they not select it? That's also not so super problematic to look at. And then we have a very big box of verbal data, various verbal data. And that could be from the service, for example, Julia mentioned it, Marie mentioned it, when they explain their individual understanding of a guiding thought. So transparency means this to me. That's a sentence, a word, it's verbal data. We have to look at it and look how we can analyze it, how do we work with it. But it can also be the verbal data from our solution sessions or the workshops. And that's a different kind of verbal data. That's conversation or kind of analyzed conversation already. So that would be a classical way to look at our data. And then that's the right-hand side. That's, well, let's call it the gate perspective, the gate lens to look at the data. And that's the focus on what is this data doing in our boxes, in the service and in the workshop. So we have data that serves as an input. That's the guiding thought that we derived from literature reviews and focus group interviews. And these guiding thoughts are implemented into the service as prompts. So that's data derived before the service even, but serving in the service. And this data, these prompts, these guiding thoughts can be selected in the service and they can be explained in the service and new guiding thoughts can be added in the service. So there's already an interplay between the guiding thoughts. And then we have data produced in the workshops. So the solutions is data. What kind of solutions do we already have out there? The gaps that Marie and Julia already talked about. That's also data that we're collecting. And that kind of stresses, and both the right and the left, that's both a valid way of looking at our data. But through the gate lens, we're more in this logic of our data is interacting. So there's this circle of knowledge, this circle of data going around. And you can go to the next slide, Marie, I think. And there's an interaction between our data sets. So there's an interaction between the guiding thoughts coming in, being selected, being explained, and then new guiding thoughts being added, for example. And that's why we speak of dialogical data. And I think we know what we mean by this, but it's not self-explaining, or it might be not clear to everyone. So what exactly do we mean by dialogical data, or more maybe dialogically generated data? So we really mean this data is generated through, including virtual, because we don't always see each other. People in the service don't talk to anyone actually, but it's a dialogical interaction with the data rather than only one standardized instrument. And this dialogical approach is characterized by the joint collection. And I'm stressing the joint element because we talked about bottom up and top down, and we really always say the GATE is this bottom up initiative. So the momentum of co-creation with the community is very important. And that's a very important factor in this dialogical model of data, in this interaction of GATE data also. That was just a little excursus on what do we actually mean by dialogical data. And then in 2 slides, let's dive a little bit into the rich verbal data we talked about. And this is an example from the service and some individual understandings of the guiding thought transparency. And we have talked to you, Daniel, already about ideas. How could we also integrate this data maybe into nano publication? That's why we have this bubble on the right corner, that we're also thinking about the possibilities of integrating this data into nano publications. But at first glimpse, what we have is rich data or heterogeneous data. So we have different understandings. So first person, for example, says, well, we work on open science concepts and transparency is one of our core values. So we're in values. And the second person stresses more the moment of visibility and how do I make my research processes, my data, my decision making, how do I make it understandable? And then number 5, for example, is talking about tools or processes, saying, well, enhancing transparency through certain mediums, pre-registration, for example, or registered reports. Now, what can we do with this? One option would be to just show it like this, and then people can read it. And it's very rich, and it might be inspiring, but is it structured? Is it helpful? Question mark. But it might be an idea to publish it as nano publication if someone would like to read it up and would really like to dive into the data and maybe work further with the data. That would also be an inclination that we have. But a second option would be to add an analytical layer, and that's on the next slide. And we talked about mapping, and we talked about thematical analysis, and we talked about emerging themes in the data. So that would be one option to structure this rich understandings that we have, and say, well, what's in there? What are these different understandings are actually telling us? What layers are they referring to? What common understandings do they have? And what we see overall when we apply this method is no surprise. Transparency is not one action. It's not one understanding. That's obvious. It connects with the value of openness. It connects with how research is made visible and what enables the practice of transparency. So we could say we have 3 emerging themes. We have the theme of values. So why does transparency matter? What's the principle that is so important in transparency? And we have a theme of processes or outputs, and the question, how is it shared? And also, what is shared? So what is transparently shared in my research process? And then the last theme could be about practices and infrastructure. So how is transparency enabled after all? What tools do I need? what support do I need? What infrastructures do I need? And so on and so forth. So that would be the analytical layer of thematical analysis. And then we would have it more dense, synthesized, and easier to present in something like a report. That's one example of our verbal data. And the second is even richer. That's the verbal data we have from our workshops and solution sessions. And here is an example from the solution session we had in Hamburg. And these sessions were not recorded. So we don't have the verbal protocol of these sessions. And that's not what we're aiming for. I'm just mentioning it that we all have a view of what the data looks like. We have moderators in the sessions, and many of them are here. And they already took notes in their groups. So of course, this is already a step in between. So it's not the pure dialogues and interaction we had. It's already an analytical step to write down the notes and to summarize them. But what we can do with these notes is we can condense them really or even further and map them into different themes again. And these could be proposed solutions or proposed actions. And within that, we also see best practice, but we also, and that's been mentioned already before as well, we also see existing gaps. So through clustering already in the workshop, through the moderator, and a second mapping and clustering that we did when we wrote the report about it to further dense it, distill it, we could kind of structure this data and make best practice, implemented solutions, new ideas for solutions, and already gap analysis visible. And also this is something that we have been discussing that could be published in nano publication, to just say gaps identified at workshops XYZ, and then we have the gaps. So that's also one idea of how to work with this rich verbal data from the workshops and solution sessions. That's just ideas. First ideas, first steps that we're doing. But we would, of course, love to discuss that with you. And you have, I'm very sure, further ideas and questions of how we can turn this data and Gates concept into, what says it here, meaningful, easy to understand community legitimated report.
Yeah. So thanks first. I think that was quite a good overview. It was very fast. I hope you could follow. So yes, the floor is open. It's maybe we concentrate or focus the discussion on really what would be the next, or what would be suitable steps for the report. So we do not have to fix it down in a sense of whatever we decide now, we can never change. However, the goal is really to have a draft ready in May. And we didn't start. So this is what we have now. And we do have the data. So the discussion today would really be on what would be suitable steps, how to proceed. I can also give you two topics, but I think open discussion is good.
Well, let me just start the same way I just started with the notes thing. So here, the notes document was empty, and that kind of makes it really difficult to take useful notes, which is why I started just putting in something so that we have something to start. It's always easy to criticize or to build on something that's already there, rather than having an empty page, at least for me. The same here with your, like the way you ended your part, and now Tim and I are to jump in, and there's not that much structure. So I would have liked like specific questions. Or for instance, we could go back to some of the slides where you showed examples, and then we can use those examples to discuss some things. And then also some quantitative summaries, like how much data do you actually have? And like on how many guiding thoughts, what are the ones on which you have most data? What are the ones on which you have no data or very little data? Did any potential new guiding thoughts pop up on the way? Did you find it difficult to map between the things you got via the survey versus the things that you got via the sessions? These are all starting points, and we could exercise each of these things together or in some other form. And I don't know how far you've gone in these directions. So right now I can basically only return the favor and asking you questions.
No, that is totally okay. So we have so the person who has the most feeling for the data. There is no analysis of the data right now. Yeah. So, but the person who has the best feeling is Annika, because she's the person who is in there. And I don't know, Annika, if you can just give some numbers on these guiding thoughts. They don't have to be like on top.
Well, we do have guiding thoughts that we do not have any data on. So our data sample is, I would call it sometimes difficult to approach, because we have many people entering the survey, and we have also many people dropping out of the survey at some point when it comes to entering material. So we clearly see in the data that we have a big interest in stating general guiding thoughts on open science at the very beginning of the data. So what does open science mean for me? There we have quite high numbers, but when it comes to what do I actually do in my material? What do I work with in my leaflets, in my articles? Then participation drops. So yeah, we have blind spot, Daniel. We have guiding thoughts where we don't have a lot of understandings, and guiding thoughts that are not picked very often. So transparency, fair data, accountability, and guiding thoughts that we could all kind of relate with easily are the highest, that we have understandings. But there's also, especially, and we didn't mention that again, but the GATE service from the very beginning on was structured into target groups. So it's not only that we have everyone in there is one group, but we say, what target group do you identify yourself with? And it could be researchers, it could be data stewards, it could be librarians, it could be policymakers. And we clearly see that we are addressing mostly the research area. So we have a good value of data on in the area of researchers or people that teach students and are addressing researchers. But when it comes to policymakers or even the technical components, so research infrastructure supporters and this area, the GATE services, we're not reaching them yet. So we really have to think on how to reach them. And something else, Daniel, yeah, it's also sometimes a challenge to bring together the GATE service data, where it is about counting how often a guiding thought is selected, and how many understandings do we have, and how do we analyze these understandings, on the one hand, and then bringing it together with the data in the solution sessions. But we don't perceive this as a problem right now, because one is the current state that we gather through the survey, and the other one is really discussing in the workshops with the people, where do you see good implementations of open science, where do you need more support, what are the gaps? So for us, it's basically two sides of the coin. this is what people think about open science, and this is what they would actually need to push it further.
Okay, well then let's work with that a little bit. So you have a bunch of guiding thoughts. I still don't know how many.
We have, sorry, yeah, we have 16. We have
16. Okay.
so
Then
60 sorry, 16 are implement because that's the target group specific approach we were taking. So we're presenting 16 guiding thoughts. I can show you the list in a second. Marie, you can open it up. 16 guiding thoughts that you can select for researchers. So when I identify myself with a researcher, I'm presented the list on the left-hand side. And then I can say, I can pick any. So there's no number. We're not saying pick a maximum of 5 or something. Pick the ones that you're addressing in your material. For the group of researchers. For the group of data creators, we have, or data stewards, so we group them up. We have 14 guiding thoughts we're presenting to them.
okay,
And then, sorry.
I already see like questions popping up here. So for instance, for the care principles, ethics, and fair data are missing on the right-hand side. And each of this could be questioned, but anyone having data in their job title should be aware of the fair data. So I think that at least they should have that. And why exclude ethics? And so yeah, that's one thing. Second, then you said you have for some you have a lot of data, and for others you have none, basically. And then the question is, what does that mean for the next steps? Do we then want to basically zoom in on those where we don't have data, try to find data, or do we want to strengthen the analysis of those guiding thoughts for which we have some data? These would require different approaches.
Second.
The second. Okay, so you're fine with not covering all of them. That's okay. And then the question of redundancy comes up. Like the fair and care principles, they have been talked about a lot. And yet another report on this is probably not going to impress anyone, even if it's well written and nicely illustrated and those kind of things. So you could still kind of prioritize these, let's say the remaining ones for which you have some data, by whether publishing a report on them, or let's say giving them a lot of emphasis in the report would actually add to the landscape. And here I could think that a number of them, like traceability, for instance, could be in such a place where it is actually useful to have another report on this. Collaboration is maybe a bit too broad as a concept. As open as possible, as close as necessary. If you Google that, you will find a million hits. And so, yeah, and then putting on the different hats of the different groups again, it might actually be interesting to see, like traceability, that is on the right-hand side. And so then what do the different groups that you have targeted, what do they contribute? How do they handle these kinds of concepts?
And would you also, all of you, we've discussed that before, would you also think that let's stay with maybe the guiding thoughts for the researchers and the students. And just when we use, for example, an analytical layer, thematical analysis, and you say now some of the guiding thoughts might be more interesting for the audience than others, because some have been talked about and some are fairly new. But wouldn't it not also be a possibility to give, and I don't know in what format yet, but in an easy readable format, the idea of all the guiding thoughts that we have and the understandings that we can deduce via, for example, thematical analysis? Because also something like, okay, fair is maybe not the best example because it's quite easy to define fair. But then again, there might be different layers, another R and an R. So yeah. So also this is something that we might think we're on the same page, but then we're not. So it might also be something interesting, and you're free to disagree, to see for all the guiding thought in a very short, easy to access format, and that could be nano publication connected to it. I'm not saying the report is going to be consisting of nano publications, just to see what the understandings of the community in this year is, instead of selecting before guiding thoughts that we think are interesting to present.
And let me just add, I think this is an interesting idea. And we also have the additional guiding thoughts, which the participants said, which are missing, don't we? Or are they already in the 16? No.
No,
No,
no, they're
they
not.
aren't.
No.
And also, there are other guiding thoughts in the background that have not been included into the questionnaire, due to being most of the most important ones or famous ones. But this is also a question, if you select something, according to which principle.
Yeah, here then the one question would be like, how well or in what way do you want to cover the entire landscape, or do you even define the entire landscape? Like, we haven't asked, let's say, trash truck drivers for their perspective on open science yet. And to what extent are they important? They're certainly part of society, and we depend on their services in some way, but they're perhaps not central to the groups you've defined so far. And then maybe the missing things, they should be reviewed from a certain perspective of, like, are they missing because there is no data? Are they missing because they're not essential? Are they missing for some other reason? And then we probably need to sort them out. For some of those missing things, we might want to go on a chase, try to find some data, and for others, we might want to say, well, maybe not this time, right?
Can I take that and jump with it and go a little bit more? Yeah, okay. So, thanks for all of that. So, some thoughts. Yeah, I actually like where you were going on that last one, which is, if I understand it right, this is the first report. All this comes from the literature, so it says it's important. Somebody's writing about this, right? Somebody's communicating about these topics, despite, how related or unrelated they are. Nonetheless, you guys use the methodology to bring these up. And I think that's really good. And so then you're up to your point. I completely agree, Daniel, right? Which is like, all right, well, now you've got heavy data on some and not on others. So to me, it doesn't mean that they're not important, right? That's not what you would say. But it creates the next question, which is, okay, well, just because we can't say anything about them because of either no data or very little data, it just opens the door of, right, well, what next? And it just, to me, then it gets back at the heart of this, which is, and again, the numbers are there, which is not just how many, but also where'd you go? Right? Where did you get them from? That metadata of like, what conferences did you go to? What do we know about where this got reached? Because that's probably a piece of the equation. That doesn't dismiss this. It just means be cautious how you interpret it. And then it says, well, if we want to basically fill the gaps, we have to approach the gaps. Or it could be that those gaps actually are real. That even though people talk about it, you guys keep bumping into it, and you're seeing a group that just doesn't want to engage with it for some reason, and that suggests there's some barrier there. Either it's misinterpreted, not being understood right, or it's not actually penetrating deeper into the dialogue that you guys are trying to approach. That takes years, but anyways, I think that's a good framing because it gets at like, right, what was the methodology used, and like how do you interpret the data, no matter how you present it. The thing that I'm wondering, and I think it's probably the most important piece, maybe back looking again. I'm glad that you reflected on the first meeting. I did not say this, Daniel. You and the other speakers said this, which is, what is the point? I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean that in a very sincere way. Who is the audience this is for? And my gut tells me it's many, which means then the question is, do you have a singular report that attempts to hit them all or not? And it made me think, I think it was one of the slides, right? It says, right, back to your audiences, not your audiences of like skeptic and open science expert. It's actually who you're trying to reach. I think it is like the policymaker or the librarian, whoever it is, right? What do they want? What do they think they want? How do you present the data to give them that knowledge? And then the harder one is, how do you tell them what they didn't know they wanted? And I think that's probably what you're trying to get after, right? Which is, I'm trying to help you use this information for what you're trying to achieve from your perspective. And maybe there's something in here that you didn't realize. And that latter one is a really hard one to tell because it's our blind spot. But I think that's actually, to me, like that's a bit of what you guys are presenting and navigating. Let me finish two more thoughts before I have it. I don't want to forget them. One is, yeah, when you were showing your rough structure, you had what? Intro, findings, and I forget what the last one was. Hmm, You don't have the slide.
Outlook.
Outlook, okay. So what you're gonna have in there is what I typically like in reports, mostly because I don't read everything, to be very honest, is executive summaries.
Mm.
Now there's a pro and a con to that. The advantage is you summarized it for me. You told me exactly what I was looking for. That works well if it's like a singular audience and you know exactly what you're trying to say. It doesn't work well if you're trying to get them to like read into something they're not. So I just add that there, that like I think that's something you have to, maybe you guys have wrestled with and already thought through, which is how you want to present that. Because if it's overly wordy, people might not engage because it's too complex for them. And I think, like I said, I did not say it, but others said it looking back at the first meeting and your two anecdotes you gave, Julia. The other one is I really actually like the way that Annika, like you were talking about the dialogical data. Tell me if like this is like a little bit of a tangent, but tell me if this is accurate from your point of view. It's kind of like AI prompting, like LLM model prompting, except for instead of it being the way I do it, which I go talk to Gemini, and Gemini and I have a conversation with each other, right? I go round and round and we're playing off of it. You're doing it with a group that didn't realize that they were all hanging out with each other, talking, right? We're like kind of bouncing the conversation around. So I really like listening to you, that popped in my head, which is like, oh my gosh, this is like AI prompting, but like we don't really know who's doing it. It's like the telephone game of AI prompting because you're playing off, because like you're saying, it's living, right? You're playing off of each other. I don't know if that makes sense, and two, if that is how you think about it as well. Only in the sense of like trying to wrestle with like how you communicate that, because I think that is a piece of this, which is it's kind of this living conversation that's going on. You want that, and yet it's not as if everyone's all in the same room because that's impossible. And actually, this is the big thing in I think research at large, and just like any other part of society, which is we are all not in the room. We will never all be in the room, yet we want to hear each other as best as we can. So that's just me trying to think about like that really cool concept, but in different words.
I think thanks to both of you. I think we haven't talked about it. Maybe Julia, you have been thinking about it this way in AI prompting way, but it has this without being between two people, answer question, answer question, digging deeper. But in the bigger picture, I think this is what we're trying to achieve. This is where we're trying to get. And maybe the picture is helpful to bring this across. So it's a bit Socratic to why are you asking me this? Why am I giving this answer? We're not triggering this in the end, but this is something that we would like to do. And this brings me back to the report. And now you were talking about the executive summary, and I think we didn't state it, but we were definitely thinking of putting one. And I see the problem with executive summaries. But what we also didn't state, and what we discussed in one of our last meetings, and I think also Dania, we talked about it, that we clearly need a methodology. And now methodology sounds super dry and boring for a report in a way. But I think what makes the gate special and strong in this stadium is not the huge amounts of data we have and covering all the groups and knowing everything, but more the way that we're approaching the subject and open science and the way of trying to capture the OS ecosystem in a way, and what's behind it, and this idea of ongoing knowledge exchange, and the circular idea, and the dialogical idea, and the interaction even of the data. So we probably, now that we're talking about it, we need to make that even stronger in the report without making it sound boring or dry, because that might be a danger. At least I'm sensing it in a bit.
Yeah, I'll weigh in. I think so I agree. Like, you always want methodology, especially on something in open science. Definitely want to be exposing what was done. But you're absolutely right. Like, you don't want it boring, you don't want it dry, and you don't want to make it sound like the report is something it is not. At least not now, right? It's even evolving right here. Um, so then in some cases, the kind of way to convey this concept that right that you're articulating, I think is the most crucial thing, because it puts it all back into context. What you gave me a report, what is it, and what am I supposed to do with it? And what's interesting is, like, you kind of don't have to answer it, and you do have to answer it. You don't have to answer it, in my opinion, because it's for the reader to decide, it's the user to decide. But you do have to answer it, because I'm not going to pick it up if you don't tell me. And I think you're right. Like, that's actually the crux to this, in my opinion, especially in the beginning. Which is why is someone going to pick it up in the first place? Knowing that you also, right, are going to have to explain, which I think you lean into personally, right? Which is, yeah, it's not an answer, right? It is the beginning of a conversation. It is an ongoing conversation. So you're really trying to capture a conversation that's hard to capture. That's at least how I understand it.
Mhm.
And I think that's really great. But yeah, you're going to have to explain that in few words, and especially if you're going to a broad audience. Yeah, I think you were saying, like, if you start talking to policymakers, or I mean, always sound bites, right? Everyone loves their 10-second clip. So that's going to have to be done as well, just to engage folks. With that said, I think that's just a piece of it, and then that helps, because I think that also will help then with how you present the analysis and the data, right? Because it should map to that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can we go back to the slide where you suggested these three layers of the guiding thoughts, Annika?
You mean the thematical analysis with the,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
here. Yeah.
The emerging themes, three of them.
Yeah. Sort of connected to what we just said, no? So when it's mm, I also think so. It's a bit of a game in, okay, we present you something you want to, or you want to know, in the sense of, even if it is only like, oh, I knew that, I knew that, I knew that, yeah. And then, like, giving something which they didn't know before. The question is that no, would that be a good would that be a good structure to do it? So we do have I think what's very interesting, but maybe that's a personal thing to me, is which guiding thoughts were added. We don't have data for it, no? But we only have the single terms. But we do have the guiding thoughts which we didn't prompt, and were prompted by others, in the sense of, okay, these are important and they are not in your list. Yeah. I think that's some, like, this would be, this would be one part just of interest for people. And then the other question is, okay, of the guiding thoughts which were prompted, um, so what's interesting there?
Yeah, so for example, I'm still hanging with the topic of the gaps, yeah. And now for the year 2025, it would be interesting to see which guiding thoughts are a topic, for example, for data stewards. Do they mention data protection, intellectual property protection? And you already discussed this, Daniel, why is a guiding thought here in this group and not there? It's also interesting to see which guiding thoughts have been added. Yeah, is, for example, data security increasing this year or not? And from these dynamics, we can also have a prospective view into the next period, and maybe I don't want to go too much forward. I know that sometimes I'm too fast, but maybe it's interesting to see. Topics like metadata annotation has not been mentioned, but this is the way we have to go too. So it should be communicated somehow to the community. If infrastructures are scaling up, why? Because of increasing data. But they have to scale up also regarding control mechanisms. Yeah. And different formats of data. Yeah, so I think it's really important to have a focus also on the gaps. But I'm wondering how are we legitimated to identify, communicate these gaps? Because the gate has been developed with a purpose to really mirror what the community says, what the community is practicing, and now with also all of us, we have knowledge in open science. We reflect on the current developments. We think about where to go with increasing data. Which gaps are we able to formulate, and why? Yeah, is it just from our personal knowledge, from our personal feeling, as it is maybe not mirrored in the data collected?
I'd like to go back some steps. So I just looked at your logo again, GATE, Open Science Learning. And so I'm wondering, like, why do people want to learn about open science? How do people learn? And how do these things work together? So there are many different reasons why people might want to learn about open science or not. And some of them will be visible somewhere in those guiding thoughts or in the data you already have. Then there's general knowledge about how people learn, and I think you're well placed to work with that. And then there is motivation, and there the different groups that you're trying to target, they could come in. Like a librarian or a data steward, they might, or a student or a researcher, they might have different motivations, also different backgrounds on how they learn, why they learn, which aspect of open science they actually need to learn or want to learn, which gaps they see, which gaps they don't see, which gaps they should know about, which gaps are not so important to them. And so one way could actually be to put the learning thing into the center, and like the student or the learning objectives into the center. What aspect do we want to teach? What aspect do I want to learn as a learner? And then what are the most effective or the most whatever kind of mechanisms to enable these learning processes? What kind of learning materials should be there? What kind of support structures should be there? Can we do quizzes or practical things? And then that would all be kind of frameable in terms of things that people usually already know. Everybody knows what a quiz is, basically. Some people will know what practical experience is, and then we can build on that. And maybe we can think about, like, in terms of the summary already, just we could think, instead of text summaries, we could do infographics that are often more engaging. But also in terms of practical things, we could think of small exercises that people could do in order to like learn more about this and that aspect or guiding thought thingy. And so if we were to put the learning experience into the center, I think some of those questions would actually become more concrete. And the benefit of engaging with this ecosystem for different people would become clearer than if it's yet another survey, yet another report, those kinds of things.
And this leans in very nicely, Dania, with what we saw at the solution sessions and the workshops, that even, and that's experts there. I mean, people from the field at least. And even they are finding more gaps or wishes on how to teach well, bring open science out to the world than final solutions. So that would lean in with what you say. And then again, we have this fight between, are we addressing the policymakers or are we addressing the learners? How do we get people to learn about open science and make it didactical in a way, not only dialogical but also didactical?
I would actually include the politicians or policymakers into the learners, hopefully.
Very good.
But they would learn differently. And for them, the executive summary is the only piece of learning that they will allow themselves. And so for them, it has to be like pinpointed. But for others, like the student, maybe it's a game or whatever. We don't know. And for researchers, hopefully, it's practical experience.
Yeah, I do think the a motivation all of them have is to hear what the other groups say. I think that's something which learning also constitutes. So we normally do not want to hear what we say again, like some I do, but no, but normally we want to hear the other perspective, no? The other, so how is it explained from somebody else? So going back to our stakeholder groups, until now we always thought that the data we collected for researchers and students, we can give back to researchers and students. But maybe it's even more interesting that we give this information to the policymakers and to the librarians, because they want to know, librarians as a support, research support, they want to know how do researchers see the world so that they can adapt again. And that would tap into the learning and also to this dialogue we started. I know we do not have enough data, but I think we would have enough to start this conversation. And then to explain, okay, no, this is the way, no, this is something we want to establish so that we, for example, right now we don't have any policymaker. We couldn't get any policymaker to answer our service. But I think librarians and researchers would be interested actually to read what policymakers say about open science. So it's always so maybe it's more interesting to read and see what the other group says. And then normally the learning is so in such a setting, you want to have the most interesting information at the beginning, and then you want to have the ability to dig into, but not all, please. It's just only you want to have the possibility to dig into so that you can click something, and then you go in, and then you can see why. So this layered approach.
I think regarding the target groups, I think we have two different perspectives. Those who are applying open science and who learn from practice, and of course they have to know the perspectives of the research, has to know the perspective of data steward and vice versa. But the other target groups, such as infrastructure providers, policymakers, I think they learn especially from the other target groups. Yeah. instead of providing knowledge. They might provide some thoughts on this is the way how we want to go in the future if we think of the European research area. But I think more they have to know what is out there, what's problems, what structures do those have that really practice open science. Yeah, and those are two different perspectives.
Yeah, thanks also for your comment, Tim, in the chat on do we or are we thinking of including experts in the report?
Or giving them voices. I think that's his point.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
are clearly including them,
Yeah.
but merging all of them into one source or
Mhm.
having, let's say, distinct flavors in different parts of the report. That's his point,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna add another comment real quick too. Julie, you said it. You should run with it. You said a phrase that I liked a lot. It's the start of a conversation. The first gate report is the start of a conversation. It's not the answer to it. So it's really like good framing from my perspective. And then the question is, if I heard you right, there's a learning component, but there's the conversation of whom to whom. And I think it's totally fine for researchers to talk to each other, right? Clearly we do, right? But you're absolutely right, which is I also want to understand from the groups that are not there. And yes, of course I can have my individuals, but you're trying to capture it at like a level that's very hard to capture because it's, you can't have everyone in the room all the time. So that's why you're doing like a thematic conversation essentially. But anyways, I just like your phrasing as like a really good way to frame, especially your first report.
I'd like to bring up the AI again. So, because you have a lot of textual data, AI is relatively or can be decent at analyzing textual data, at categorizing things, summarizing things, and also you can have dialogues with it. And so I was wondering whether we could have sessions where people basically just engage with some AI around these things, or you could feed some of your data into some AI, of course, not the commercial ones, something hosted at University of Kiel. And yeah, you can host it on your laptop these days, and then play with those things. They do provide useful, let's say, spin-off points, and they're really good at structuring information. They're good at identifying key themes, and also if you say, "Oh, we have 17 guiding thoughts," you can ask them, "Hey, to what extent do those 17 overlap? Can we drill them down to 12 or so, or something like this?" They can do these kind of things, and then also if you then want to keep in mind the missing ones, you can give it just like 5 of them. Say, "These are my starting guiding thoughts. Can you give me 12 others?" And those kinds of things they can do really well because they have been trained on this kind of statistics. And I think it is valuable to consider these kind of things. Also, you can ask it, "Hey, here are some things that researchers said about open science. Imagine some pros and cons from the perspective of a decision maker to engage with these things that the researcher said." And again, they can do this because they've read the internet essentially. And so whenever a politician said something or a decision maker said something about why this aspect of open science is good or bad or difficult or straightforward or next, then this is part of the data that they've been trained on. And like being a bit more active with those kind of tools would perhaps enhance the kind of dialogue that you have with these two tools, the survey and the sessions. And because you could essentially have many of those sessions in between, and you could also have that online. You could have a chatbot, AI chatbot that then also helps identify potential resources that would be useful at the point where people jump out of the survey. But you could you could kind of get people to play together with the AI to actually find these things and then comment on them. Maybe the AI finds some rubbish or something that you already have 15 times in your database, or maybe it actually finds a nugget that you wouldn't have found otherwise.
For that, I like that idea very much, but for that, we need the data somehow accessible for AI bots.
I don't think so. You can use a general llama kind of thing. They have been trained on the internet already, and you just feed them with prompts. You give them structured prompts. Hey, here I have a response to this field in my questionnaire,
Yeah.
and please map it to those 17 guiding thoughts or something like this. That's the kind of thing they can do very well. You give them an input matrix in Markdown or whatever, and then you have some slots where you put your data points in, and then you get structure, and you can even ask it, hey, give it out in a table. I want to have it in a matrix that considers these three criteria, and you should apply a Likert scale for those 5 variables, and so on. All of these things are things they can easily do. They have trouble doing this in a reproducible fashion, which is why you still need oversight. You need to interpret it, you need to guide them, or you need to be very precise with your prompts. But in terms of moving you forward, like how to handle the missing bits, how to basically maybe reframe certain things so that they fit better together, so that you cover the landscape in a more even way, all these kind of things, they can be done with such approaches. Or you could have the AI fill in the survey 1,000 times and see what it says.
Yeah, that would be synthesized data. I had it. I understood it the other way around. So if we produce now a report, people, of course, now can work with the report. They will use AI and the report, yeah, maybe, yeah, to get some answers. But wouldn't it not be better to also give them the data in a way that it is used, so that whatever they are asking. So what the question is, what is new? Yeah, because as you said, okay, not everything. If we ask now an AI tool to search the net for open science and traceability, we will get a lot of answers. But what the gate data brings in new, yeah, is okay. No, this was collected in 2025 from the research community. Yeah, so it's not only like 1 or 2 or 3, but it's no from several. At the beginning, we wanted to connect every guiding thought to a publication, yeah, or to an identifier, but that didn't work. It seems that open science, so this is something we realized. It seems that open science, even interested open science people, because they answer the service, yeah, they don't have their material open. They cannot put an identifier on, so they drop out. Yeah, that's the point where they drop out. They do not want to put the identifier in. So, yeah. So in my head, it was always like, is there any possibility that the AI tool will also use the data we have? Yeah, because that would be really interesting.
In terms of using the data, it would help if you were to share it first.
Yeah, but that's the question. That's what we are asking. Yeah, it's how shall we can, of course we can share it. We can share it in an Excel sheet, but is it better to use the nanopub? Is which way, that lost my question. Which way makes it easily accessible?
It depends again on what you want to achieve. Like if you want to have people, if you want to reach people who are not prepared to spend a lot of time on this, then things like an infographic are probably more promising than nano-publications or a long report. If you want to provide people with an option to dive deeper, a long report might be the answer. But if you want to have machines help you in the process, for instance, discovering and make people discover your guiding thoughts, then something structured like nano-publications can help. So all of these things, they have their different purposes. And but in general, I think eating your own dog food is useful. I think I've mentioned that phrase before. So if you were to basically do more of your steps in the open, then people could, yeah, it's a tech phrase. It basically means I want to be the change I want to see. That's the Gandhi version of it. So if you were to do more of your stuff, or a certain part of it, even a controlled part of your stuff in the open, then people could see where you are, what you're struggling with, and they could comment on this. Also, one thing I don't like about the questionnaire right now, I filled it in, but I don't know what everybody else has filled in. And I probably would have comments on those. Maybe some of the things where others dropped out, I could have dropped in, because things like this, all of that, if you were to share more of your data, the framing, all of that, then the open community can more easily engage. It's really hard to engage with a closed box.
Yeah, and I like that thought. We ask in the service, we ask, are you do you want to be named in the report, in a sense of that if they click that, we can do more or less whatever we want with the data. But there's, I think, Annika, but you know better, how many did not click? There are a lot of people who do not click that, huh?
Yeah, I don't know. I would say it's maybe a third says, yeah, mention me in the report.
Mm. Yeah.
But
And the others do not want to make it public. It's just from, so I really like your idea, Daniel. Yeah, that would be, no, you would have an advocate here with me. However, the world is completely different. What I realize is, so I even got 3, 4 emails, like people asking me, how do I know how to explain traceability? What is this questionnaire? Yeah, I was like, you can answer whatever you want. There's no right or wrong answer. But people feel like this is typically social empirical research. People, as soon as you ask them something, they think they have to do it right. Yeah. And if they're not define themselves as experts, yeah, they do not want to have their name connected to their answer in the open.
That's fine, but I think here then we have a kind of Sollbruchstelle, it's the German term, like the not sure how that translates to English. That's like a place at which we can make a cut. So I just said you could pick a part of your data and then just take that third that said yes, share my data, and you leave the rest unshared, and then you can see one of the functions of open data is also to fish for more data of the kind, or to fish for people who have an interest in that kind of data, fish for projects who are doing similar things. The search engines will do the job for you to some extent, especially if you provide structured metadata. But that only works if there is at some point some pointer to something that is public.
Yeah. Okay. Are we out of time now? Yes, no? Yes. Okay. So first I'd say thank you to all of you. I think this helped a lot. In the next few weeks, we will include now your thoughts, and we will keep you updated via email on which steps we are going. And yes, I think maybe one more meeting before we then really start drafting, so that you can maybe add your thoughts again to when we finalized on how we are going to do it. But first, thank you very much for your time. We lost Etienne. I hope he's still alive somewhere. But let's see how we can find him and add his thoughts too. So have a nice evening or day wherever you are, Daniel.
Yeah, one more thing before you share like the first draft report, maybe just share the table of contents. That's already a very useful level at which we can engage.
That sounds good. Okay, very good. Yep. Yes. So wherever you are, enjoy your day and your evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.